All right, we are here on the Great Scott podcast with Dallas Page. Welcome, Diamond DDP. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Good to be here, bro.
I
You're
I
back.
am
You're Barry, right?
Yeah, I'm Barry. I have the most Jewish name you're ever gonna see. I want to talk to you about kind of start with the early days. Like, how did you start in profession? I mean, you have such an amazing career. How did you start in professional wrestling? Like, did you start in Minneapolis, like a lot of other people did? In
Yeah,
AWA.
that's where I got my break. I actually tried to wrestle when I was 23, but it didn't work out for me. I had three matches back in 1979. And then when I was running a nightclub in Fort Myers, Florida, Jake had come in and Ted DiBiase, the Bushwhackers, because I was in Fort Myers. And if you work Tampa one night, and you work Miami the next, that's 300 miles. And like Fort Myers was almost right in the middle. So Jake was the first one to stop by our club.
Hmm.
He was probably filling up gas and saw, a happening club, parking lot. And he stopped in. And of course, I took care of him. He didn't pay for anything. We had a good night. And he told a lot of the boys, next thing you know, the Bushwhackers were in there. Luke became a very good friend of mine.
Hmm.
He actually put this picture up on his Facebook probably about 9 months ago,
Oh
and
wow.
he put on the caption DDP before he was DDP, and we had a good time that night, and it really started to stimulate wrestling talk,
Hmm.
because I was a big fan growing up as a kid. And I ended up making a videotape and sending it to Vern Gagne's AWA.
Right.
And about 2 weeks later, this is in 88, 1988.
Hmm.
And man, Vince had pretty much, stolen all the main talent
Right.
from the AWA, from Hulk Hogan, Jesse Ventura,
Right.
Gene Okerlund, Bobby Heenan. I mean, there's four of the biggest stars of that era. And a few guys went to, Ted Turner's World Championship Wrestling. So they were getting stripped. So when I made my videotape,
Hmm.
I didn't think about sending it to the two top ones because I had no experience.
Right.
And it's very I forget what the word is when it's very relationship involved, like sons and daughters. Nepotism is a
Right.
very nepotism. Back then, it was big time nepotism because the sons, you know, follow the father because they want
Right.
to be wrestlers, and um, so it was very tough to find a way in.
Hmm.
So I thought I was too old to be a wrestler at the time, so I made up a tape as a manager,
Right.
and I took three guys who wanted to be wrestlers. Here's one of them right here, sitting on my desk. You can see I got a few pictures up here, and
Just a bit.
it covers the whole room. But the ones I tell stories about, for like
Uh-huh.
if I'm doing a cameo or something,
Right.
I do like a show and tell. So one guy who's one of my bouncers was named John.
Right.
So I called him Big Bad John.
Hmm.
And that's me and him and a guy named Captain Jack who had a great pair of pipes as
Right.
an announcer. He was here for Independence. If you look at my jeans, I had holy jeans
Hmm.
in 1988.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So like it was a statement to me back then.
Right.
So it was kind of funny when it got crazy, 10 years ago, and everybody started like ripping the shit out of their jeans.
Right.
Um, but I named him Big Bad John. I had another buddy of mine who was a bouncer named Rick. I called
Hmm.
him Rock Hard Rick,
Yeah.
and I had a little guy, a midget, who worked the front door for me
Hmm.
and would stand on a bar stool, and his name was Ted, so I called him Teddy Bear.
Okay.
And these guys look like wrestlers,
Right.
and I made this videotape and I sent it to the AWA. And 2 weeks later, I got a call back.
Mm-hmm.
And I hear, hello, this is Rob Rustin from the AWA. Is Diamond Dallas Page there?
Right.
And no one had ever called me that before, because
Right.
I just made this up. When I wrestled, 8 years earlier, I wrestled as Handsome Dallas Page. And I was a big fan of Handsome Jimmy Valiant.
Right. Oh, I love Jimmy.
And I ended up hearing him say, Diamond Dallas Page. I'm like, yeah, who's this? He's like, Rob Rustin? Yeah, he goes, yeah, we saw your tape. We like it. We want to bring you and your boys in for a tryout.
Wow.
But we've got one question. Where you guys been working at? No one's ever heard of you before.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had to tell them that, none of those guys could wrestle.
Right.
And it was pretty much, don't call us, we'll call you.
Hollywood.
And
Hollywood.
The only reason that it happened was because Paul E. Dangerously, better known as Paul Heyman, left the AWA
mm-hmm.
and went to the WCW and left a huge void for a young guy that could talk. And next thing you know, this is literally my first day in the AWA, and I had Bad Company who won the tag team titles. And the only reason I know this is day number one
mm-hmm.
is because of that girl.
Okay.
And she was my first Diamond Doll. Her name was Leanne. And Lee only did it once. She did it the first time I ever did it. And the rest, was history.
Right, definitely. And one of the things that you said, which was fantastic, was not everyone can go from manager to wrestler. I mean, people, and we don't see as many managers anymore. I mean, Paul Heyman right now, I mean, he's great. He's doing great. But what made you want to go from, being a manager, being at ringside, talking it up because you had such an incredible voice, to working actual matches?
Well, because I was so flamboyant and over the top, having, there's a picture of me and the Freebirds. I was managing those guys, and I was managing the late, great Scott Hall. And this is him as the Diamond Stud. And I thought I was on a roll. I thought, man, this is going to be great. I can't wait to renegotiate my contract.
Mm-hmm.
And then about 5 months into my contract, Magnum TA brought me into the office where, we had TV that day.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, listen, D, we like what you're doing with Eric Bischoff. We're like fourth string color commentator and play-by-play guy.
Right.
And he said, but Dusty asked me to do this because he didn't have the heart. He's like, we can't let you manage anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, why? What did I do wrong? I go, I'll fix it. He said, you can't. I go, what do you mean I can't? He goes, it's not your fault. I go, if it's not my fault, we can fix it. He's like, not really. And he said, I go, well, what's the problem, Mags?
Mm-hmm.
And he said, D, to be honest, it's you. It's the hair. It's the clothes. It's the bling. It's the rap. It's the Diamond Dolls. It's like when you're out there, no one's paying attention to anybody else but you out there. You're taking too much attention away from the boys. Mm-hmm. And Scott Hall had warned me about that. He's like, D, you got to get a little less active out there, man. And, you got so much shit going on. And what ended up happening is I was, still with the company because I did production and I did shit behind the scenes because Dusty loved me.
Mm-hmm.
But I just saw my career being over for the next guy who, like Larry Zbyszko, if he was to retire, he's going to take my spot as the color commentator.
Oh, okay.
So I had 7 months left of my contract, and I went in to see Magnum the next day, and I said, I'm going to go down that power plant. I'm going to learn how to wrestle. And he kind of laughed.
Mm-hmm.
Not like at my face, but it's like, D, by the time you figure out what to do out there,
Right.
you're going to be too old to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And originally, I was focused on doing it not to be a Hall of Famer, not to be a world champion. That would be absurd for me to think that.
Mm-hmm.
But my goal was to get to what I called the Jake Snake Roberts, Rick Rude spot.
Okay.
And what I mean by that is when they went to the ring in the WWF back in the day,
Mm-hmm.
I don't give a fuck who they were wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
When they went to the ring, you didn't know who was going to win.
Right.
And that element of doubt, like, oh, he's not going to do the job this time,
Mm-hmm.
you know, or just like, you don't know what's going to happen. So that was my goal. So I could go back and be a credible announcer,
Right.
you know, and, you know, my goal was to be the next Jesse Ventura because Jesse, I thought, was the best ever at color.
Okay.
Play by play, Jim Ross, you know, then
Yeah.
right underneath him, Tony Schiavone, and you know, Gordon Soley was his own animal, you know.
Right. Yeah, his own thing. Yeah.
But as a color guy, that was my goal. And when I told the Freebirds, now I'm doing TV for the last time, and the
Mm-hmm.
Birds, they love me, and they brought me in. I was a rookie, you know, and they let me talk for them.
Right.
Him, Michael PSA's and Jimmy Jam Garvin, maybe two of the best talkers ever in the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
And they, oh God, they bust my balls. They ribbed me. There was a lot of fun, but it was fun at my expense being
Right.
the rookie.
Yeah.
And that day, when they heard that I was no longer their manager and that they weren't going to let me manage anymore, they were so empathetic. They really cared. They came up very solemn,
Mm-hmm.
and was like, man, so sorry to hear this, D. You know, like,
Right.
this is part of the business, though, man. It's part of the animal, you know. And you know, they are right. You take a lot of attention when you're out there, and I said, hey, don't worry about me. I got it. I mean, I knew within, I'd say, a half an hour of Magnum telling me
Mm-hmm.
what I was going to do.
Okay.
And at first it was emotional gravity and like, oh my God, what, you know, why is this happening? You know, and all the negative stuff of pulling yourself down.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't ever stay there when that shit happens. You know,
Right.
I start to, okay, how do I fix this?
Yeah.
Well, the only play I had was to be a wrestler, go down the power plant, learn how to wrestle. I had 7 months left of my deal. So
Right.
that's what I told the Birds. I said, I got 7 months left of my deal. I'm going to go down the power plant. I'm going to learn how to wrestle. And they both looked at each other and back at me and back to each other and then burst out laughing
Wow.
like it was the funniest thing they ever heard, the most preposterous thing. Michael fell down. And you know, now they're playing their music. So I just looked at him, gave him "You're the number one" sign,
Yeah.
and said, "I'll see you out there." And I went down that power plant, Barry, and
Yeah.
so many people, you know, want to be wrestlers.
Right.
People who are listening to your show right now, their
Mhm.
dreams, they want to be a wrestler until they get in the ring,
Absolutely.
until they hit those ropes, which bruises you up and down in the beginning. Eventually get used to it. But in the beginning, it's so foreign to your body. But even more foreign is falling down or taking a bump.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you don't take it the right way, you can really hurt yourself.
Absolutely.
But when you start taking the bump, they might put a guy on his hands and knees.
Mm-hmm.
And then you put your hands on his back.
Right.
And then you kick your feet up into the air and then you fall flat on your back.
Mm-hmm.
there's nothing normal about that.
No.
If I pushed you and you went to fall off that chair, the first thing you do is reach back.
Right.
First thing you do, because that's what your instincts tell you. Break the
Right.
fall.
Right.
But that's not how you break the fall in professional wrestling. To break the fall, you try to land from your shoulders
Mm-hmm.
into your hips,
Okay.
hitting the mat with your hands
Mm-hmm.
and hitting your feet all at the same time. So the shock of that fall would be like getting hit in your car from another car,
Right.
you know?
Yeah.
So if you don't tuck your chin, you can whiplash yourself. I mean, there's so many things that could happen.
Yeah.
And there's nothing natural about it. Now, if you're a young kid, you could hit. And if you're a tough young kid, you can bounce right back up again.
Mm-hmm.
I was 35 and a half years old. So I can't tell you how many times my body hit that mat that first week. And I thought,
Mm-hmm.
man, this fake shit hurts like hell.
Right.
I mean, it really hurts. And I'm in a gym, not a gym, a warehouse with
Mm-hmm.
4 other rings. It's freezing. And there's no adrenaline. There's no people there.
Mm-hmm.
So you feel every square inch of that mat in the beginning.
Right.
And again, it's incredible what your body can get used to, but it took a while. And I can't tell you how many times my body hit that mat those first couple of months.
Wow.
Over and over and over and over and over again. And I thought to myself, man, do you really want to do this?
Mm-hmm.
And this is where second guessing yourself has got to go out the fucking window.
Okay.
You can't second guess yourself. If you're here, you're here. And if you're here, you need to fucking dig deep.
Mm-hmm.
And every time I'd answer yes, like in my brain, I am going to be a top performer. It's the only story I tell myself at that time. And it's interesting because I wrote a book called Positively Unstoppable.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all about the art of owning it. And it is that 6-inch piece of real estate in between your ears. It is that inner voice. It is the story you tell yourself. And the only story I was telling myself is, I'm going to be a top performer. Everyone laughed at me.
Mm-hmm.
They thought I was crazy. But one thing I learned, when people are laughing at you, they're laughing at themselves.
Yeah.
And it means that I'm onto something, because everything I've ever done in my life,
Mm-hmm.
when I first told people I was going to do it, they go, come on, you're not going to do that.
Right.
What makes you think you can do that?
Mm-hmm.
What makes me think? Me.
Oh, a little technical difficulty. Oh, there we go.
Okay, there you are. There you are.
Perfect.
For me, it was a long, hard road, and 9 months of wrestling. When I finally started wrestling, and Dusty put me with Kevin Nash,
Mm-hmm.
and we were the Vegas connection. He was going by. There's a picture of me and Vinny Vegas.
Vinny Vegas, yeah, I remember.
Along with that's Raven right there.
Really? Wow, that's a 180 on the look. Wow.
Yeah, right. And I tore my rotator cuff in a match.
Mm-hmm.
Me and Kevin against Shanghai and Shanghai Pierce and Tex Slazenger.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like someone shot me in the shoulder.
Okay. Yeah.
And I went out, friggin' said, Kev, don't tag me back. I think I broke my shoulder.
Right.
I had no idea what I did. Couldn't lift my arm up like this. Couldn't lift it up. And at the end of that match, here comes Tex Slazenger to hit me off the apron. I'm like, oh, no.
Right.
The bottom line is, I had 3 months left of my contract, and that's about when I was healing. And
Mm-hmm.
Bill Watts, he ain't gonna,
Yeah.
he's not gonna, he's in charge at that time. He's not gonna do anything with me.
No, no.
The really cool thing was Jake had come into the territory probably about 4 months before I tore my rotator cuff,
Mm-hmm.
and he came down to power plant one day and he saw me and he went, Paige, because that's my real first name before I changed my name.
Right.
That changed my name to Dallas Page 25 years ago, kind of like
Mhm.
what John Wayne did.
Yeah.
His first name was Marion. Like,
Oh. Wow, I didn't Marion, huh?
yeah.
Oh man.
Well, freaking Dusty's first name, and he never changed to Dusty Rhodes, which I was really surprised.
Uh-huh.
But his first name was Virgil.
Virgil, yeah, Virgil Reynolds. Yeah.
Yeah. And um, that neither one of those names would have got over.
Right.
Dusty Rhodes would get over. Virgil
Right.
Reynolds, not so much.
No, I mean Dusty Rhodes, son of the plumber. I mean it fits. It's good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So Watts was letting me go, so I knew I was done. So I beat him to the punch. And I told him what I was going to do. I said, Bill, when I come back a year or so from now, you're going to want to pay for me to come back. And I was very confident in all of that. But it's a story I was telling myself too.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you can't let anybody rip you down here.
Right.
And Jake had come in probably about 4 months before I tore my rotator cuff. So for 3 months, he was there. And he came down to power plant the very first day that he came into the territory, and he saw me in the ring, and I hear Paige, and I turn around and it's Jake. And I'm like, dude, he goes, man, I thought that was you, because he knew me as Paige. He just knew me as Paige. He didn't know me as Diamond Dallas Page.
Right.
I never told anybody that I wrestled before any of that shit. Be absurd. Yeah, I used to wrestle,
Mm-hmm.
I never told any of the guys that.
Right.
And we really got close. Me and Kevin, me and the big man, we drive the car, we freaking pick up the bags, and we just wanted to be at the foot of Yoda, to learn.
Together.
Yeah, to learn from Jake.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, Jake was gone because of his fallout with Bill Watts.
Mm-hmm.
And when I had torn my rotator cuff and I was home, Jake had called me to see how I was doing.
Okay.
And we talked for a while, and he told me him and his wife were split up again.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And I asked my wife if he could move in with us. And he moved in for like 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, man, I cannot wait to get once his shoulder gets better and I get back in the ring, man, I cannot wait to get in the ring with you. And he's like, listen, you know more moves than, he said, I used to have 100 moves. Okay. Then I had 25. He said, now I have 5.
Right.
That's it.
Mm-hmm.
And I know exactly when to do them and where to do them.
Mm-hmm.
He goes, you're going to learn more on the couch sitting with me than you ever learned in the ring. And that was so true. Because Jake would go over my matches with me and, just smoke a cigarette. And why would you do that? What were you thinking here? And he would make me figure it out. Sometimes he would just tell me, don't do that, or that's good. Mm-hmm. But most times he'd make me figure it out, which was really, it's how I would learn how to teach as well.
Yeah, and that's incredible because not everybody can get something like that with someone as awesome as a mind as his to run your first matches back like it's the JFK footage, back to see what's going on. So that is pretty awesome in itself. Going back a little bit more on the indie stuff, what was the craziest crowd that you've ever wrestled in front
of? In the indies, I wouldn't really say any of them were that crazy.
Mm-hmm. Because everyone seems to have a story about one, something like that.
Yeah, I don't really have any of them.
It's okay.
I think the hottest crowd I ever wrestled in front of was in the 90s. In 97 when WCW got white hot.
Yeah.
and I was working with Savage,
Right.
and now I get to pull the puppet strings,
Right.
on the people. It was powerful, man. My whole thing with Randy was, we were the feud of the year,
Mm-hmm.
over Bret Hart and friggin' Steve Austin, which was a
Yeah.
pretty damn good feud.
Yeah, that was
It
awesome.
it made Stone Cold,
Mm-hmm.
It was
Absolutely.
so funny that match, and I just watched it the other night, and when Steve got the juice, and he passed out. Instead of tapping out, he
Mm-hmm.
passed out,
Right.
and that was brilliant,
Yeah.
brilliant finish. But the bottom line is, ours was more electric.
Mm-hmm.
Our match, it was Randy's last big feud.
Right.
When he passed, WWE put up Randy's 5 greatest feuds.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, the Mega Powers.
Right.
Then, of course, Hulk against Randy.
Right.
Of course, Jake.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, Steamboat. And there's us, me and Randy.
Mm-hmm.
To be in a group of guys like that, when Randy had feuds with everyone,
Yeah. Right.
every single person he feuded with.
Right.
Dusty's and his stuff was great,
Right.
but they put ours in that top 5, which to me was amazing. And it's really funny because Randy's the first guy to literally write out all the shit he wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
I was from that school because I could do both. I could call it in the ring,
Okay.
and I could lay it all out.
Right.
And because when you're laying it all out, your memory has to be really good.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
And mine got better and better and better. And I didn't just lay it out.
Mm-hmm.
I'd call the whole thing the entire match. So it wasn't like I was expecting you to remember shit.
Right.
I just wanted you to know what was coming and tell me what you want to change.
Mm-hmm.
And guys would bust my balls so bad. Come on, Dally, how many times are we going to go over this? I go, until I know we got it, and bust my balls so bad, but no one busted Randy's.
Right. Right.
Nobody, and it just makes, and today they all do it.
Mm-hmm.
Today it's all laid out.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
but it was me and Randy were the first 2 guys to do it together.
How hard was it on some of the other matches you were in, like working with celebrities such as Dennis Rodman and Jay Leno, David Arquette, so when you have some who have only trained for either a little bit or that are just coming in for the one gimmick and they're gone. How was that? How hard was that to lay out differently than working with someone obviously like Savage?
So crazy. Because they only work a little bit to figure out what they need to do.
Mm-hmm.
That's what's so amazing about Logan Paul.
Right.
Like, that motherfucker, people can hate him or whatever. That motherfucker is talented big time, man.
He's jumping off of the ring in Saudi Arabia onto Roman Reigns. I saw the other night. I mean, it was fantastic, and I didn't know much about him because I'm kind of out of his demographic. So, they bring him in and they're talking about, oh, he has the world's most expensive Pokemon card. That's great. But when he's doing actual moves and we're, doing a really fantastic laid out match, I don't care. The guy's doing fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even call him a celebrity match at this point.
Right. Absolutely.
He's one of the boys. I mean, he has a natural sixth sense of the business, and he did not grow up a big wrestling fan. Right. And I know because I met him in the elevator, and when I shook his hand and introduced myself, I realized he had no idea who I was.
Wow.
So that means to me, and he's one of those guys who would have grown up around that time watching the Monday Night Wars.
Right.
But obviously he didn't. He might have gotten into it later on. Mm-hmm. But I mean, the Miz could The Miz could do all the stuff that I can do
Hmm.
when it comes to laying out and making the guy look great. Like
Yeah.
the Miz was the perfect person for him to be with in the beginning, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. The Miz
and get him kicked off. But when
started the
you get
real
to
world.
Roman, Roman's the man.
Yeah. I mean, he's just. I mean, he's earned it. You know, he's earned it too. Um, couple. Yeah. Oh, speaking of like moving to Holly, you know, like Hollywood stuff on. I saw you were in a deleted scene in the movie Rat Race on the bonus
It
feature.
was a great
I
scene
saw that
too.
you. I know. I saw that you guys were. You were fighting. Like it was like in a mobile home alongside of a freeway. I mean,
Yeah, it was
why don't
actually
we?
a house. We were
Yeah.
moving the house, and the only reason it got cut
Yeah.
was because people didn't like seeing Cuba get his ass beat all
Oh.
over the place.
uh,
And Kimberly was magical in it.
yeah. It was
You know, the
hilarious.
whole opening scene, he's for some reason needs clothes.
Hmm.
So he sees this house going down the road and he runs,
Yeah.
gets the thing and pulls himself in the house, gets in the house, and he's in the bedroom and the house is moving. And he finds a pair of sweatpants. So he goes to put them on. And all of a sudden, you see in the bed, it's a friggin' Kimberly pops up and she's
Yeah.
wearing like a negligee
Yeah.
and she screams. And I go, Kimberly, and I hit the
Yeah.
door, which hits him and he goes into the bed.
I loved
And
it.
it's a Murphy bed.
Yeah.
And it goes up in the wall. This is brilliant
Yeah, this is naked.
writing.
I mean, it's one of the same directors. It's Naked Gun type stuff. You know what I mean?
Yes.
We only have a couple minutes left, so I wanted to just first of all, on behalf of everybody in the business, thank you for everything that you've done.
Thank you.
Also, you're one of the most. You probably are the most motivational person in the pro wrestling industry. You know, just not just from a just from wrestlers or promoters perspective, but from a fan's perspective. You know, taking people who have some problems and reaching that helping hand, being the guardian angel of the professional wrestling industry. That's kind of how I see it. So I'm very happy to talk to you today. And DDP Yoga, if you want to take a couple minutes to talk about like kind of how that started, and a little bit about that.
Well, it's really came out of necessity. I'm the guy who wouldn't be caught dead doing yoga the first 42 years of my life. But, you know, my career took off on the back end of 40, you know, and my birthday was April 5th
Okay.
and 1996. So if you get to like September, my career still hasn't taken off yet.
Hmm.
And then going into October, when me and Eddie Guerrero, and Eddie helped really put me on the map as a guy who has improved dramatically
Hmm.
as a wrestler. And I loved working with Eddie. He was very magical.
Yeah.
And Eddie was supposed to go over in the Halloween Havoc match. Most people don't know that.
Oh wow.
But he came off the top rope to me on the floor, and how he landed, he tore some white cartilage in between his rib cage because it's not red.
Hmm.
Red's full of blood. White it's muscle, but it doesn't have real blood in it.
Yeah.
Very thin. So when you injure that, it's hard to breathe. And if you watch that match, Eddie keeps going. He keeps doing stuff, and I have no idea until the time I go to pick him up, and he said Diamond Cutter.
Hmm.
I went, no, Eddie, you're Diamond Cutter, Diamond Cutter. I took 2 steps back and hit him with a Diamond Cutter and pinned him. I'm not going to argue with him out
Yeah.
there. He's
No.
putting me over,
No. No. No.
you know. And that was a really big win for me.
Hmm.
And I had the idea of the NWO thing for, you know, a while. And I brought it to Kevin because they still weren't giving me any kind of a push to
Yeah.
get past the middle of the card.
Right.
And like I said, I always wanted that Jake Roberts, Rick Rude spot, which they weren't giving me that. They weren't giving me that opportunity. And so I went to Kevin
Hmm.
and I told him the idea. And he loved it. He said, go tell Eric. I said, I'm not telling Eric shit. I got to tell Scott
Yeah.
because Scott's the one taking the Diamond Cutter. And I helped Scott out. Like Scott in 1990 couldn't get WCW or WWE to call him back
Mm.
because they'd seen him and he never got over.
Right.
He wasn't ready yet. You know,
Mhm.
he wasn't that guy yet.
Right. Right.
And so even Dusty, as much as he really loved Scott, he wouldn't bring him up
Yeah.
to try out. And Magnum told me that. And I was like, Mags, what if I could change what he looked like? Because their whole thing was he's been up here twice
Hmm.
and he never got over. And I said, what if I could change what he looked like? And he's like, what do you mean? I go, what if you don't recognize him?
Right.
And he said, listen, tell him to come up. I'm not flying him, he said, but I'll make sure he gets a tryout.
Right.
And that's where the black hair and no mustache and the buzz cut beard, the 5 o'clock shadow,
Yeah.
which Scott had like at 2 o'clock, you know, and
That's good.
he was so fucking handsome. I mean, he was the best looking dude ever in professional wrestling.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He was perfect from his body to his Superman looks for a
Yeah.
face. And he did that curl around the whole Superman thing.
Yeah. Super cool.
And he couldn't get the companies to pick him up. So he called me up, and that's when I created everything and got him hired. The day he was on TV as a Diamond Stud,
Hmm.
got a call from Pat Patterson. Whenever your
Yeah.
contract's up, maybe we should talk. And next thing you know, he leaves and he's Razor Ramon. And one of the most iconic characters ever in professional wrestling. He should have been a 5 or 8-time world champion, but the reason he's not is because he had a lot of demons,
Right.
because that son of a bitch was like Jake. Jake should have been that,
Yeah.
Jake, nobody was better than Jake in his prime. Nobody.
Right.
And he had a lot of demons, the two of them together.
Hmm.
That's what's so amazing. If anybody hasn't seen the resurrection of Jake the Snake, you should
Yeah. I
watch
see
it
it. It's tough.
because
It's tough to watch.
it's super inspiring too.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Scott, when I told Kev, he's like, Scott, you don't think he wants to repay you
Hmm.
for what you did for him? He goes, because his wife was pregnant with Cody at the time.
Right.
This is 30 years ago. And I went and told Scott, and he was like, I love it. Go tell Bischoff. I go, I'm not telling him shit.
Yeah.
We'll let the big man tell him. And what ended up happening, the bottom line is that we went and told Bischoff that night at the bar, and Kevin did all of the talking.
Love it.
And next thing you know, we're doing that angle, but they literally put it on TV and took it off TV when I was about to drop them, probably about 7 times,
Yeah.
7 weeks in a row. And it finally happened because of Kevin and Scott. And when it happened, it put me on a rocket. And then Randy Savage came into my life, and the rest was history.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, DDP. Thank you for everything.